Alright, the Shove It Squad. Awesome Kong is one of the most famous TNA knockouts of all time, despite not making her name in the WWE. Kong and Gail Kim were the seeds of which the Knockouts division grew out of and made it must-watch telly. But when Awesome Kong left TNA in 2010, a huge Kong-sized gap was left in the Knockouts division. For some reason, TNA were incredibly hesitant and slow at adding new knockouts, and it was frustrating to see this once great division wilting. Eventually, TNA reached the decision that new blood was needed and they set about bringing new people in. Hardly any of the new girls succeeded, apart from maybe Taryn Terrell and Miss Tessmacher, but they were lacking a monster. Everyone was a bit samey. What is it I always say? Variety is the spice of life, like a punch to the gut. TNA remembered how awesome Kong was, and they thought they'd repeat the formula. But none of the new Awesome Kongs could hold a candle to the real thing. So in today's video I'll be shoving you the 3 women TNA tried to turn into Awesome Kong. Call this the not so awesome Kongs. My first pick would have to be Alpha Female. German wrestler Alpha Female joined TNA in 2014 for a short tryout period as Impact was filming in the UK. She joined TNA protecting Chris Sabin from a beating by Velvet Sky. Fans instantly chanted, "She's a man!" Billed at 6'2", she certainly looked intimidating, but at the same time looked a little bit goofy and didn't seem to have much muscle mass. She was also somehow Chris Sabin's girlfriend, replacing Velvet Sky. He sure downgraded there. I think the idea with Chris Sabin is they wanted it to be a bit like Chyna and Triple H, but it didn't seem to work out like that. She was not green in the ring and had a decade of work under her belt, so this should have been much better. Everything that she did was boring and slow. She reminds me of the female Giant Gonzalez. She only had 3 matches. Velvet eventually pinned her and the storyline ended there without a conclusion. She actually turned down a TNA contract offer, although I'm not sure why they wanted her. She was booed everywhere she went. Ultimately, this giant raccoon-like creature could never hold a candle to the real Awesome Kong and had zero connection to the fans. I wonder if her and Chris Sabin still meet up. Jessica Havoc. This one to me was the most disappointing. It all just went a bit wrong back then. Her initial TNA push was just not good, man. This one also starts out in 2014, showing that TNA were just desperate to fill the holes in their depleted roster at the time. It was yet another indie signing, which made the show feel more small time. She makes her TNA debut attacking Gail and Taryn. Instantly you're drawn to her complete resemblance to the Hamburglar. Seriously, this would have looked so much better without the goofy face paint. Her mannerisms were also strange as the crowd sat in silence. Havoc had by far the biggest build out of the 3 mentioned wrestlers today. She immediately got a monster push, attacking everybody and focusing mostly on Gail Kim and holding up her title. On paper, this all seemed like a very good idea, but Impact did a very poor job giving her any sort of backstory. We were just left to make our own minds up, and my mind immediately told me that the evil Hamburglar was just here to be evil. Even her music sounds like Awesome Kong's at the start at least. Then it's dubstep. Her first match is a battle royal where the strong booking continues as she cuts through pretty much the whole roster. Rebel is eliminated in a pretty ugly way, I'm not sure whose fault it was. And it comes down to Havoc and the TNA favourite, who else other than Velvet Sky. Havoc wins the match and is the #1 contender, and within a month Havoc was challenging Gail Kim for the Knockouts title. It is weird seeing TNA legend Gail Kim being handled around so brutally, and she takes a devastating hammerlock spinebuster on the outside. Gail is so injured by the attack that she's taken away, but I guess she wasn't that injured because the match restarts later in the night. It's clear that Havoc isn't actually bad in the ring, but her character and weird mannerisms are killing it. Havoc wins with a chokeslam and has won the Knockouts title in a very short space of time. Was it too soon? Probably. The show literally goes off the air with her winning, so it's a massive spot for her. She also defends against Madison Rayne and rolls over her with ease. Madison was highly rated in the company too, so it's surprising to say the least. Not long after that, there's a big rematch with Gail and Havoc once again wins. And it's cleanly. Trust me, Gail wasn't doing the JOB to many people. This was a big deal and TNA was throwing everything behind her to make it work. TNA even take it one step further with her next title defense being against both Gail and Taryn. 90% of this match is Havoc destroying both her opponents at the same time, and it's actually a lot of fun. But despite that, completely out of the blue and for no reason at all, Havoc loses her title because Taryn pinned Gail Kim. This has all apparently happened as someone backstage made a last minute decision to take the belt off Havoc. Believe it or not, everything in all the matches I've just described took place only over 3 days, as TNA desperately tried to save money by taping in a block. Something at these tapings soured management on Havoc, and her title reign is only technically 3 days. It was like someone had just flipped a switch and that monster push was completely abandoned and forgotten about as Havoc lost every following match. Well, as it turned out, something had changed because TNA brought back Awesome Kong, who they saw much more value in as a monster. After a long build-up where Havoc doesn't speak and just stares at Kong every week, the two finally meet in a cage match. The battle of who is the better Awesome Kong. I'm not kidding, there was nothing else that they were fighting over. As it turns out, the best Awesome Kong is the real Awesome Kong. And after that loss, Havoc was quietly dropped from TNA. Why have the Wish version when the real thing is available? Despite her incredibly strong push at the start, they did nothing to help her. The crowd didn't care because she looked like the Hamburglar and she never cut a promo. What was her story? Why did she wear a mask to the ring? Why was she so vicious to the other women? TNA only did half the job and it ended up being bad. I don't know what would have happened if Kong hadn't come back, but she was aging and in hindsight it was the wrong decision to go with Kong. Havoc didn't have a TNA contract the whole time she was champion, and someone at the WWE found out. She was offered a tryout with the Fed, but on the third day, racist and homophobic tweets from her 2011 Twitter were revealed and it cost her the shot at the WWE. So she burnt bridges with both TNA and WWE. It also seemed like she may have had a big personality that challenged people too much. That's just my opinion from what I've been reading. So she went from nothing to dominating the TNA Knockouts division to the WWE and back to nothing again in the space of 9 months. She is back in TNA nowadays, but I can't help but feel she messed up the prime of her career. For the fact that she had a monster push and then it disappeared so quickly, I can't help but label this as bad. Lei'd Tapa. This one seems like an obvious and easy signing for TNA at the time. She had wrestling in her blood as she was the niece of the Tongan barbarian. She stood almost 6 foot tall and she had a sort of an impressive look. There was one problem though. She couldn't wrestle. She joined TNA through their Gut Check program, a monthly segment where aspiring TNA wrestlers battle it out to impress the judges and hopefully earn a contract. Her opponent was Ivelisse Velez, and the Knockouts division was crying out for new blood at this point, which is why most people wanted Ivelisse Velez to get the contract as she was far more ready in the ring and she could go to the main roster straight away. But as usual, the Hawk has to hit you like a ton of bricks. Tapa got the contract and Velez did not, despite her losing the match between the two. It didn't make sense and it was a poor start to her TNA career. In what world does the loser get the contract and the winner doesn't? The crowd also chanted no to signing her. As she was not television ready, she was sent to developmental. She rejoined the main roster 9 months later, taking out Velvet Sky and siding with Gail Kim. Tapa would go on a tear of the Knockouts division, beating everybody on her path with her TKO finisher, but the matches weren't very exciting. After a few months, Tapa and Kim had a falling out as Tapa kept costing Kim matches. Now they would have a feud for the ages, just like Kim's historic battles with Awesome Kong. Small issue though. They were both heels, and Tapa was not Awesome Kong. The match was so-so. Don't get me wrong, it was nothing offensive, but this just showed the differences between Lei'd Tapa and Awesome Kong. Kong had an exciting and impactful arsenal of moves, whilst Tapa was just kind of boring. She's defeated in 5 minutes and released from TNA straight after. The reason for her release was her lack of experience. Well, I'm pretty sure TNA already knew that going in. Didn't stop them trying though, did it? This was not the last of Tapa in TNA. Lei'd Tapa found employment in a new wrestling company which invaded TNA a year later. And a wild slapnut hit.
Jeff Jarrett.
Tapa was back, and completely out of the blue, she has a dream match against her idol, Awesome Kong. Tapa now has a manager, which is probably 2 years too late at this point. I think it was actually her real life husband. For 5 minutes, these two giant women bang and slop into each other with nobody leaving their feet. Kong hits a crossbody which does finally get a knockdown, and in just one move, Kong demonstrates why she's so much better than Tapa. After what felt like forever, Tapa hit a Samoan drop. Hang on, Tonga is not Samoa. And now it's time for a segment, because I just love segments. It's time for yet another Taz factoid.
I got a factoid for both you guys. I got a boil on my ass.
Did you know that Tonga is not Samoa, but it's a neighbouring island nation with a population of over 100,000 people? So there's your fact, now shove it. The match ends in a double countout, perhaps hinting at a feud and a proper future match. Instead of that, we have a 4-way knockouts title match featuring Kong and Tapa, who continue their feud during this match. Once again, Kong outshines her, but this was by no means a bad match, and Tapa showed improvement here. Gail wins because But at least we'll get that Kong-Tapa feud now. Nope. Instead, Awesome Kong went back to her old ways and feuded with Gail Kim. The more things change, the more things stay the same. Tapa was released from GFW, and despite a few tryouts for the bigger companies that are around now, she hasn't done a whole lot in wrestling since. For some reason, someone online was such a big fan of Lady Tapa's that they decided to write a full non-fiction story about how they envisioned her last day in TNA went. And I'd like to read you a section of that story. I don't know why I'm even doing this, but I read it and I couldn't stop laughing. If that wasn't disgusting enough, they followed up with a bucket of manure. This is going to give you an idea what the rest of us smell when you're around, you filthy pig, Gail said. Madison Rayne got the honours of dumping the stinky manure up and down Tapa's body. She poured it onto her legs, breast and ass before pouring the final bit over her head. Actually, I think that's an improvement. You smell better now than I can ever remember. The Hawk is all for fantasy booking, but I think this guy isn't going to be making it anytime soon. I know I spoke a lot about Lady Tapa here, but she gave me the most to talk about. Her run was not offensive at all. She was just a complete charisma black hole and she was too green. But she stuck around for longer than the others despite being greener than the others and despite being the most boring out of the three. I don't think I saw a single impressive thing from her, which is the complete opposite of Awesome Kong, and therefore she has to go down as the worst Awesome Kong replacement. And if you don't agree with that, I'll kick you with my lace front.